Hi and welcome back to the channel. My name's Drew. This is Just a Guy Linux on YouTube. And today I'm going to be doing a Debian 12 Bookworm minimal install. I'm using the net install that we downloaded a couple days ago in a video. Basically, it is the one that's connected to the Debian.org homepage. The link will be in the description below. It's the most prominent download on their website. The goal will be to do, like I said, a minimal install so that you can kind of build on that minimal install for installing a desktop environment or a window manager, or even just leaving it as a server. You don't have to install a graphic environment at all if you choose not to. I am going to be doing BTRFS as the file system so that you can set up snapshots with time shift in the future. I'm also not going to be setting up a swap drive because as an SSD, since my hard drive is an SSD, I use Zram for swap. So let's get started. We're going to go to the advanced options. And the reason why is so that we can set up the manual partitioning. And I'm going to go to expert install. Now it's not that expert, so don't think that you cannot accomplish this. It is not that difficult. I just hit enter, by the way, without even thinking about it. And English, and I'm in the US. And once again, I'm setting up my base locale, and I'm hitting continue. I usually just hit enter here and enter here, and I'm using the American English keyboard. So I am also installing this on Metal, which is not a virtual machine. So if it looks like there's some either slowness or something like that, it's just it's the test machine that I'm using. I'm hitting continue, and I'm hitting continue again. So far so good. We don't have to do a whole lot. We're hitting enter quite a few times in order to get to the spots where we need to slow down. I'm using a wired connection for this particular video. You'll see in a second. Once I configure the network, my primary interface, there's both wireless and Ethernet on this particular test machine. I'm going to use the Ethernet connection, and I'm going to hit auto config. Now, granted, this may be a little bit more challenging than doing something like using Linux Mint or Ubuntu or something like that. At the end of the day, though, we are not going to, it is our choice to have this type of minimal install so that we don't get a lot of other stuff installed. So anyway, my host name is Just a Guy Linux. I hit continue. Not that concerned about the domain name, so I hit continue again. Now, when I hit the setup users and passwords, I typically select no here. You can always go back to root. It's no problem. But if you select no here, you actually help yourself by skipping a step in the future. The installer sets up your user account and gives it sudo privileges. Sometimes it does not do that with when you're doing a Debian install. So my advice is to say no, allow login as root. I'm going to put my name in a couple times and a password. And I'm going to configure the clock. And I am in the eastern part of the United States. Now, it's going to detect the disks. And now we're going to go and do this partitioning where we're going to use the manual part of this. So I am going to go down to manual. Like I said before, this is an SSD. So anything that I'm going to hit and sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. Anyway, I'm going to hit enter on SDA. and I'm going to create an empty partition table. So yes, and since this is UEFI, I'm going to hit GPT. Now, I'm going to go down one to the free space, and I'm going to create a new partition, the size of which is going to be 300 megabytes, and I'm going to hit continue. And we're going to put this at the beginning, and we're going to go down one arrow to this ext and select it so that we can then change it to EFI system partition and hit enter. Notice it has the bootable flag on, so this is going to be our root, and we're going to say done. Now, there's a bunch of free space down here. Since I'm using an SSD, okay, I am not going to be setting up a swap part of the drive. I'm going to be using, like I said before, Zram, so that it doesn't write a bunch of stuff on the SSD. It kind of wastes your SSD if you set up a physical partition. So I'm just going to say I'm going to have all of this free space with the create a new partition and hit enter, and then we're going to use this as BTRFS. I'm not going to change anything. We are going to change the options coming up very soon, and we're going to hit done, and we're going to be finish right here. Now it's going to pop back and say, hey, do you want a partition? You want a swap space? And the answer is no. I don't want swap because I'm using SSD, and I want to write the changes, so yes. So don't hit install the base system, because what we're going to do is we're going to set up the partitioning a little bit better. And we're going to use, on your keyboard, hit Control-Alt-F2. Okay, Control-Alt-F2, and enter to go into the console. Now, type df space -h. Okay, notice that your SDA 1 and SDA 2 are what we are using right now. So we're going to umount target boot EFI. Okay, and we're going to umount target. Now let's do ls. You see where it says MNT? All right, we need to mount our dev SDA2 to MNT. MNT. Now, we're going to CD into MNT and ls. You'll see that at root FS, that is the subvolume that's been created, but we're going to move that specifically for time shift. And we're going to say move the at root FS to just the at symbol, okay? And we're going to hit enter. Now what we also need to do is we're going to create a second subvolume, and we're going to say BTRFS subvolume create and at home. So now when we type ls, we've got two subvolumes. Okay. Now we are going to mount that first subvolume, which is the at, and say -o for options, rewrite, and no A time. Again, we are using an SSD, so these are kind of like, all of these should be for both SSD and for mechanical drives. Space _ cache equals V2, and then compress equals ZSTD. Now, again, this is an SSD option, so I type SSD, and discard equals async. And I'm going to comma subvol equals the at symbol, and we're going to put that on dev SDA2 and it's going to be in the target. Okay, and hit enter. Now we're going to create a couple directories. So mkdir and use the parent switch there, and say target boot EFI. And we're also going to just use the up arrow here and then go back and just say home. And so we want to mount that home directory now. So we're going to go mount. Actually, you don't have to. I take that back. Go up arrow 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Okay? So we're using all the same options, and we're going to change this @ symbol to @home, and we're going to change the end of the string to and add the word home and hit enter. Okay? So we need to add back the SDA1, and in order to do that, we're going to say mount dev SDA1, 1, goodness sake, and we're going to make that target boot EFI, okay, and hit enter. Now, unfortunately, there is no way of getting around this. You actually have to use nano to edit the FS tab. So you say nano, and then /target, and then etc and FS tab. There you go. You're going to go down to this first UUID, and instead of the defaults, we are going to remove defaults, and we're going to put back the same options we had a couple steps ago. So it's going to be RW, comma, no A time, comma, space, underscore cache equals V2. Goodness sake. And then compress equals ZSTD, and SSD, comma, discard equals async. And notice that it kept that at root FS, so that's no longer valid. So we're going to take that root FS off, and there you go. Now, before you do anything else, we're going to say, look down at the very bottom, and we're going to use the cut option here. So it's Control K, and we're going to use Control U twice. So 1, 2, Control U twice. And the only thing that we need to do, well, 2 things, is we need to add the word home to the mount point. And I'm going to delete that so that it lines up nicely. And then I'm going to go to where there's the @ symbol and type @home. Now, with Nano, you use Control O to write and hit enter. And now Control X, and we're done. So in order to get back to the installer, you need to use Control Alt F1. Control Alt F1. And now is when we can install the base system, sorry. So granted, there's some effort there. No, there's no question. There's a little bit of effort there. And I could have done it quicker, but explaining it is, I think, paramount here. So I understand. I've been reading a lot of the comments, and frankly, there's a lot of really excellent comments about issues that people have had. I'm not, like I said, not an expert, just a guy. So I try to help people. I mean, but the truth of the matter is, sometimes there are bugs on release. I know for a fact there was over 100 bugs in the Debian in Debian 12 prior to release that a lot of people will probably say, oh, I'm going to wait till 12.1 comes out at least. So I'm going to hit enter here. And that's not a bad strategy. It really isn't. I'm going to use generic drivers. This is actually a really good jumping off point too. If you're doing this type of base install and you do a snapshot of it, you can go a number of different directions. You know, you can say, I want to install KDE. Well, you've got a base install that you can use, or if you want to even go to testing, or if you want, there's a number of different ways to go here. This is a good starting point though, is my point. Okay, let's hit enter. I'm going to use the network mirror, and for most, and I'm in the US, so that makes sense that I select this. Now, if you are, if you select this debian.debian.org, you're gold. In fact, I probably should just do that for the sake of the video. So I'll do that. Now, on my machine, my production machine, I'm going to hit the Atlanta mirrors because I know that it's faster. But for this video, I'm just going to select the top one, this Debian mirror, and hit enter. And continue. Now, let's talk about this for a second. The whole idea for this particular round, or Debian Bookworm, was that they would include non-free firmware in their installation. If you don't want non-free firmware, this particular expert install allows you to not use. You can just say, no, I don't want the non-free firmware, okay? So you still have that option if you use expert install. I do want the non-free firmware, so I'm going to hit yes. I also generally choose non-free software, okay? And again, you don't have to, but I say yes. When I see the enable source repositories, I think developers need this. And so frankly, I always say no. And I go down arrow and I hit the space bar to select back ports in case there's some type of update in the future. So I always put that in and hit continue. And so I'm going to select software. No automatic updates, thank you. And right there it's installing the firmware, which is, I guess, the intent, right? And I think actually there's going to be one more step where it will install Intel firmware. I always say no to participate in the package usage survey. And here is when we can select any type of environment that we want. Now it goes against this particular the scope of this video to include this. We can always add it later. So I just stick with standard utilities and hit continue. You could have added SSH too. That would have been something I would have done for a server. Let's install the group bootloader. I'm going to say no here, force, and I generally say yes. This is a new step that I'm not real familiar with, but I say yes to this particular screen. And I'm not putting another OS on this test machine, so I say no here. And we're going to finish. Now look at this screen really. It's like installing sudo, installing Intel microcode. These are options that I don't think were there before. I mean, it was there before. I should take that back. Sudo was definitely there in Debian Bullseye, where it would do the installation and set you up as sudo, giving you sudo privileges. So yes, here. And we're done. So I'm going to hit continue. And if you need to, you can always take out your installation media, which I will do so now. And there you go. I'm going to hit enter. Okay. I am going to log in. I know that it's a little bit small on the small side, so I'm going to say sudo dpkg reconfigure console -setup, and then log in, and I'm going to say OK, and that, and I'm going to go down to terminus, and I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom and get the font size as large as possible, and there you go. Okay. So we didn't have a swap, so what I will do right now is sudo apt update, just to see, which I don't think there will be anything there. That's fine. And we're going to sudo apt install Zram tools. Now, I like Micro as a text editor. It's really quick, so if this is an option, if you choose to do so, I'm going to just install Micro real quick and say OK and enter. Now I'm going to clear the screen by hitting Control L. If I type lsblk here, you'll see that Zram is 256. That's kind of before you set anything, that's what it's giving you as swap. So in order to affect more change, you're going to have to go to sudo micro or nano if you choose to just keep nano, micro, and then etc and default, and Zram swap is a file that was just added. And so we hit enter. Now for me, I don't know what to, I generally swap between LZ4, and if you look up here, you can see compression and speed. Now, I don't really care about the compression nearly as much as I care about the speed. So since LZ4 is the fastest, I'm going to pick LZ4. But I'm also going to remove the comment from %, and I'm going to go and change it to 25. Now, this is a 32 gig of RAM machine, so it's going to set the Zram swap to 8 gigabytes. So, and that's plenty. So I'm going to change it to 25, and with Micro, I hit Control S to save and Control Q to quit. And so now, when I do a reboot, I can see that the swap to Zram is now essentially 8 gigabytes. Okay, I'm going to install time shift at a later time, but this would be the minimal install. So thanks for watching and have a good day.